we go again.
Hey guys, welcome back to the second episode of Drawing with Code with me, Edward Martin. Today in this episode, I will be taking you through a tour of P5.js editor, just so you can start to familiarize yourself with how the software works, so you'll be ready to code later on in the episode. I'll also explain a lot more to do with code so that you hopefully will begin to understand it a lot more and everything will actually start to make sense. But first, before we get into that, let's do a quick recap of the first episode. In the first episode, I did an introduction to this tutorial series, kind of explaining what it is, and the language, lingo. I kind of just gave a little bit of context around P5.js as well as code itself. Code is the thing that basically create wow. Maybe I should have thought about this a little bit more. So if you haven't seen that, I would highly recommend going back, watching that episode before you carry on with this one. So today we're gonna jump right in and I'm gonna take you through a walkthrough of P5.js editor. So if you'd like to follow along at home, so you can get yourself set up, I'm using Safari, but I would recommend using Chrome. Just for some reason, I'm not 100% sure. P5.js seems to work better on Chrome, but alternatives are still fine. So if you go to your search bar and search www.p5.js.com and press enter. Right, www.p5js.com. Oh, it's .org. My mistake. Ignore me. P5.js. .org. Oh my. www. This is not a great way to start the episode. P5js.org. So you should be taken to the P5 homepage. So this is the website where it gives you loads of information. I would really highly recommend, when you get the opportunity, to just have a little browse through this website. It's got loads of information. I would really recommend going onto the examples page as well and having a quick look through all that, just so you can kind of, I think, get an idea of what you could possibly make with code. And also it gives you the code itself, which you could just steal, push. But for today, what I want to draw your attention to are two tabs on the left hand side. So first I want you to right click on reference and open a new tab, and then do the same with editor. You should now have two web pages open. The first one I want to draw your attention to is the reference page. So this page is going to be really important when you're coding. I actually highly recommend, whenever you start coding, bring up this page. What it just has all of the information and all of the code that you would possibly use. So it just comes up with all sort of information, all the different ways of using it, a big description on it, and then also just kind of an explanation of what all the terms mean. Don't worry, it might look a little bit scary right now, but it'll be fine later. I want to promise you, I think. Wow, really reassuring you. Now if you go to the second web page with the editor, like I said in the first episode, you've got the left hand side here that we'll be writing our code, and on the right it will show. So before we do anything, take a drink of coffee. We should probably create an account so that we are able to save our files. If you look at the top right, you can see login or sign up. So if you click sign up, it'll take you to this page. So you're going to need an email address, which if you haven't got one already, I would ask a parent, maybe using theirs or having one set up for you. And you just create a username, an email, and then a password. So I will wait for you to set up an account. Okay, so now that you've signed in and you've created an account, I'm going to show you how to actually save your project. So right here, as you can see, this is actually where we name our code. If you just change it to probably something that you will understand later. And then if you click save, so that's now saved your file. So you go file, and as you can see, there's a lot more options now where you've got new, where you obviously create a new file. You can duplicate your current file and then edit it, share, download, open, whatever. In Code, our file name tends to be our sketch. There's kind of different versions of things, but for today, all you really need to worry about is the fact that like what you're writing in right now is actually called a sketch. Here's a pro tip from me, which I really, really wish I kind of knew at the start when I first started coding. If you open up an old piece of code that you say you want to start editing again, I really, 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 really recommend you duplicate that code and then start editing in the new version. Because in P5, there's not like a save as function. So once you start writing, you are overwriting that whole code and you could possibly break it. It's very soul destroying when you spend hours on a piece of code and you just wreck it over something stupid. Okay, so like I said earlier, on your web page, on the left is where you write your code. So these right here are actually called functions, which is where you write your code in. These two are really important when creating your sketch, creating your code. These are the default functions that you will probably always use. The setup function here, so that is something that only runs once. Your draw function is something that continuously runs. So the way a computer reads code is it goes from one line to the next line to the next line to the next line. So in this case, it would read the setup function, create canvas, whatever, then close, and then move on to the draw function. And it would draw your background, and then once it gets to here, it would then loop back to the draw again, and it would just keep going and keep going and keep going. And that is obviously great when if you're doing something with, say, like animation, but we don't really have to worry about that too much with our code, just because our animals are just kind of like images, they're kind of stationary. So in your setup function, you can see create canvas followed by 400 400. I go into detail on to how to fully understand these sorts of things later, but just for your understanding, what this does, this is actually another function, and what this is, it creates your canvas for your drawing. So how big in pixels do we want to draw? So it's 400 by 400, so it's obviously 400 pixels along and 400 pixels down. So if I actually press play here, you can see over on the right hand side that a grey box has come up. So that is our outline for our drawing. So as you can see, it's drawn the 400 pixels by 400 pixels, and if you change this to say like 600 and press play, you can see it changes. So as you can see, like I was manually pressing this play button, this run button, which updates your code every single time. For today's purposes, I would click this here, this auto refresh, and what this does will automatically update your drawing whenever you edit the code. So as you can see here, if I change this back to say 400, oh wow, no, not that, 400 by 400. See, it automatically does it. Should be great when we're drawing. I would recommend having a quick play with the create canvas function, and just so you can kind of get a little bit of idea how you write things and how things operate on the screen. But before you move on, I'd just change it all back to 400 by 400 pixels. Just a little fun fact for you. I mean, it may not be that fun. You may not find it fun. Fun. It's a fact for you. Computers actually count from 0. So when we count on our fingers, we go 1, 2, 3, 4. So a computer actually counts from 0. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. When you're actually setting your canvas to 400 pixels, technically you're actually setting it to
399
because it's counting 0 as a pixel. So I think that's kind of it for
399.
explaining P5. I don't think we can really go on much further. I keep hitting the mic, I'm sorry. I don't think we can really go on much further without learning a little bit more about code. So yeah, I guess we're going to get into the fun stuff now and actually learn to understand and write code.
Wow.
Okay, so to follow on with this tutorial, you're kind of only really going to need to understand 3 things. So you're going to need to know about shapes, syntax, and axes. And coordinates. But like axes and coordinates are kind of the same thing in my head. Yeah, it's 4 things, but like really 3 things. Right here, I'm going to put up a piece of code. So this might look a little bit scary to begin with, but this right here is actually how you draw a rectangle. Crazy, I know. So let's just try and understand. Let's break it down. The first section of the code, so where it says rect. So that is where we tell the computer what shape we are trying to draw. You know, rectangle equals rect, ellipse equals ellipse, line and line. Triangle equals triangle. These are actually the only 4 shapes that we will be using throughout this whole tutorial. So next, I think we should have a little look at the punctuation. Like, why is the punctuation there? So when we're writing code, the punctuation that we use is called syntax. And these syntaxes all relate to a certain set of rules that the computer can understand. So let's take the semicolon at the end. When we read a sentence, we know the sentence ends with a full stop. For a computer to understand where the line ends, we have to tell it using a semicolon. Think of a semicolon as a full stop. So then what are the brackets? So the brackets are used to define the parameters of the shape. What I mean by parameters is just where we want the shape to be drawn, how big, how wide, how tall, how, I don't know, short, how stumpy we want the shape to look. So you've got X is where you're wanting to draw the code on the X-axis, Y where you're wanting to draw it on the Y-axis, the width of the shape, and height of the shape. If you've ever run into graphs before, you probably might understand that a little bit, but this is where things can get a little bit confusing. It's a little bit different with a computer. So in maths, we normally draw a graph like this, you know, X along the bottom, Y going up, and 0, 0 is in the bottom left corner. But the way a computer draws it is X going along the top and Y going down with 0, 0 in the top left corner. This is because of the way your computer screen works. So the width and the height of your computer screen corresponds to a number of pixels, which all have a number assigned to them. So imagine if we go back to our canvas, we've got 400 pixels going along the top here and 400 pixels going down with 0, 0 there. So every single little pixel along here counts as like 1 to 400. So what this means is that we can plot our piece of code to draw a rectangle using pixels. So you've got the number of pixels going along X and the number of pixels going along Y, the width in pixels as well as the height in pixels. And that is how we actually draw our rectangle, our shapes, any shape. So I'm kind of hoping you've all followed along, but I've only shown you the example for a rectangle. Different shapes are actually drawn differently. I know, it's kind of annoying, but I'm going to come back to P5 and actually show you how the different shapes are drawn. So if I go in here and put rect, I'm going to put, I don't know, 100, 180, 50, and then close it off. So you can see a rectangle has been drawn on the right hand side of the screen. So the way a rectangle is drawn is that it goes along the X like this. So it plots, we did 100, so it goes 100 across here, 100 down the Y-axis, and then draws from this upper left corner, kind of like your computer screen. So then we've got the width, 80 pixels going along, and then the height of 50 pixels going down. So yeah, the rectangle is drawn from the upper left, and ellipse is actually drawn from the center. A line is a little bit different. You draw 2 points, so you define your X and Y value for your first line, for your first point, and then the X and Y value for your second point, and then the computer will draw the line between the two. So a triangle takes it a step further by having 3 points. So you define the X and value of the first point, X and Y value of the second point, and the X and Y value of the third point, and then the computer again will draw in the lines and then fill it in. Don't worry about trying to remember all this, like it's really overwhelming to begin with, like all this information. I'm not expecting you to take it all in and remember it. It will come to you over time, with practice obviously, but for the time being, that is exactly why we have got the reference pages open. Because it means that, you know, if you go into the search bar up here and put in triangle, here we go, click on it, it will tell you and explain to you how to write it and what all the syntax are for it. Think of it as a cheat sheet. So why don't we have a quick play around with some shapes? So let's add a rectangle and a circle. So you guys can follow along if you want, just plot them anywhere you want, or you can copy the same as me. So I'm going to do 150 along the X, 200 along the Y. Let's do 100 width and let's do 120. So that's now drawn our rectangle, and do an ellipse. Right, ellipse, I'm going to plot it at 200, 200. How wide? Let's say 150, 130. Close it, semicolon. As you can see, the ellipse has been drawn on top of the rectangle. That's because, like I said earlier, the way a computer reads code is that it goes line by line. So whatever you put first, that is what the computer will see first and draw first. So this makes ordering your code really, really, really important. So now we understand how to draw a little bit of code. We understand order. Like, what if we actually want to color them? You know, they're a little bit boring, just white. So why don't we fill them in red? So this is where another function comes in called fill. So what fill does is that it adds color into your shapes for you. So the way you write it is fill, open brackets again, and then speech marks. And then if you just write in red, speech marks again, close, and semicolon. And now you can see that our shapes have turned red. What P5 has, P5 in its library, stored in its memory somewhere, it has the quotation marks for red, and it will understand and read that as the color. But what if I want to, what if I want to have the rectangle as red, but the ellipse as blue? Think about the way that we have to order things. If we're only wanting the ellipse to be blue, we have to put it after rectangle. So if I put fill, blue, and close, as you can see, it's changed color. Just for reference sake, I'll show you what it looks like if you kind of mess up the order. So if we did fill red, fill blue, obviously what would happen is that both of them end up changing to blue. So that's why you really have to think about order when you're coding. So before we move on, why don't you guys just have like a quick little play with some more shapes, think about triangles and lines, play around with different colors that you can think of, and yeah, I guess just kind of have some fun. So bonus round. I'm gonna call it bonus round. So this is just like a little bit more information about color. Like, you don't have to follow along with this if you don't want to. It gets a little bit more complicated where I break down how a computer creates color. What this will be able to do is allow you to create specific colors that you want. So in the real world, when you want a color, you mix colors together. Think about paint. So, you add one color to another and it'll create another. Think about, yellow and blue equals green, or red and yellow equals orange. Computer mixes all its colors using red, green, and blue, or RGB for short. And the way to think about it is to think of each color, red, green, and blue, having a separate value. And the more you add the red, the more red that color will be. So think of the levels. Each level on a computer goes from 0 to 255. Your fill function can actually understand these levels of RGB. So the way that you put it is you fill, open brackets, RGB, and that's what it stands for. If you're wanting to mix red, you would put fill, open brackets, 255, and you would get red. Or, if you wanted to do green or blue. So what this allows you to do is to add specific values to allow you to get that perfect shade. So what would happen if you didn't have any values? So if they were all 0, there was a lack of color, what color would come out of it? So if you put all your values as 0, it would create black because you're not adding any color. Whereas if you put 255 for all of the values, you get white. Kind of a little bit reverse to real world logic. If you're mixing paint and you add more color, it gets darker and darker. But yeah, think about computers being in reverse. So I think that's it. So we've kind of finished the second episode. I know it's been quite heavy with information, but on the next one, I'm hoping it'll be a little bit easier as long as you've kind of understood what we went through today. Oh my god, my computer. It sounds like it's going to take off.
Come fly with me, let's fly away.
Yeah, so it's been quite a lot of information, and I'm not expecting you to take it all in. If you're still a little bit unsure, maybe go back, have a little look at some of the sections, or go to the reference page, search what you're a little bit confused about, give it a little bit of a read, before we go on to the next episode, which we will actually finally be able to draw some animals. Yeah, I think we might actually start with the pig. I think it's probably the best place to start, so be excited to draw some pigs, I guess. don't forget, if you, with all your experimentations, if you want to screenshot them or take a picture of them, upload them to social media, like on Instagram, if you tag me and the gallery, it'd be great to see some of your experimentations. Thank you for watching episode 2 of Drawing with Code, and I'll see you in the next episode.